Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the third session of our webinar series on the Every Student Succeeds Act. Today's session will focus on Title I under ESSA, improving basic programs operated by state and local educational agencies. As always, let's take care of a few logistics before we begin. If you have a question or would like to make a comment, please use the chat function, which is on the right side of your screen. This is the best way to communicate with us during the webinar. Also, please note that everyone is on mute to eliminate all background noise. We do conduct some poll questions throughout the webinar. The poll will automatically show up on the right side of your screen. Just remember to click Submit after you select your answer. Once everyone has answered and the poll is closed, you will see the results displayed. And finally, I just want to remind you that today's webinar is being recorded. You can find the recorded webinars in multiple locations, such as the ESSA resources page, the Superintendent's Digest, and on CT core standards. So let's go ahead and get started. Our host today, as usual, are Ellen Cohn, Deputy Commissioner of Education, and she's joined by Ajit Gopalakrishnan, our Chief Performance Officer. Before we dive into content, let's open the first poll question and see who's joined us today. And hopefully you're seeing that show on your screen. While you're responding, Ellen's going to share with us some updates on our ESSA timeline and stakeholder engagement efforts.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. As Jennifer shared, this is a recorded webinar, so hello to those that might be listening to this webinar at another time. Commissioner Brown, I want to talk to you a little bit about stakeholder engagement, which is now underway, and our timeline for ESSA implementation here in the state of Connecticut. The Commissioner has been engaging in what we're calling Commissioner Roundtables, where she is having various events where she's talking about, as a follow-up, the 5-year comprehensive plan of our State Board of Education. Equity and excellence is the slogan for that plan, and as a follow-up, she's introducing how ESSA and our decision-making around ESSA is really tied to our 5-year comprehensive plan. It's important for you to know that we have a partnership with both the RESCs and with CERC for engaging our stakeholder groups. This is the only way that it's possible to reach as many people as possible across the geography of the state of Connecticut and to touch as many groups as possible. We are staging focus groups with over 80, we are having focus groups with over 80 different groups. At those meetings, responses will be coded. This is a form of qualitative research. We will code those responses, compile the data, and we hope to have a report back from the RESCs in late December, early January. We will begin writing our state plan in the month of December, going through the month of February, at which point we hope to post it for public comment. The leadership here at the State Department of Ed, as well as staff, have been working with groups, and many of you that are close to the department know we go to curriculum councils, we go to RESC meetings, we go to superintendent meetings. Ajit, I know you hold a data meetings routinely, meet with folks on accountability committees. So we are engaging groups, each and every one of us, as we go out to our routine meetings to talk about ESSA. We have a survey on our website that unfortunately we're recently experiencing some technical difficulties, so I can't direct you to it at this time, but it will be reposted as soon as possible. It will be found on our homepage under Quick Links, and it is highlighted in the color red. We have monthly updates to our State Board of Education, and the Connecticut General Assembly's Education Committee. We're holding a forum with them to discuss ESSA on November 16th, 2016. That is a public forum, and all are invited. Let's go back to that survey, Jen.
Okay. At this point, we have 50% of you as superintendents on the line. We have a few assistant superintendents joining us, and then we have a couple other district leaders and school leaders that are also with us. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jen. It's helpful to know who your audience is. I want to now take a moment to talk about the timeline, and you can see that we have a variety of activities and the timeline dates. I won't read through this specifically, but we are now targeting to draft our plan and have it posted by March 2nd, 2016. That's a typo. It should say 2017. And public comment will be from March 2nd to the 31st. And we are expected to submit our plan on or before the 1st of July. There's another typo, 2017. Thanks very much. And so let's talk a little bit about the required coordination across federal programs here with ESSA. It's really important to understand that under Every Student Succeeds, there is a requirement that we have coherence across all the federal programs that are funded from the federal level here at the state level. It's a great idea, and I don't believe it was required under No Child Left Behind, but you can see all the other programs funded at the federal level. Some of these will look familiar to you if it's predominantly superintendents and assistant superintendents on the line, but some of them may be new to you. I want to make a point of pointing out, you can see IDEA, Carl Perkins Act, which I'm told these two laws in particular, we expect to be reauthorized in the next several years, in this year or next year. WIOA is a very important federal program. That's the Workforce Investment and Opportunity Act. You may have heard of WIOA boards that are found regionally across the state of Connecticut. We have collaborated with the Department of Labor on the current state of Connecticut WIOA plan. Ajit, you're the one, I think, that taught me that the Adult Ed Program Act fits inside.
That is correct.
It's Title
2 of WIOA, the Adult Education and Family Literacy Act. Yep.
Exactly. We're also working with and consulting with our colleagues in the Office of Early Childhood, because I am told that under ESSA, there are new flexibilities for LEAs, districts, to use title funding to support early childhood activities at the district level. So that's new, and ESSA formally didn't allow funds to be used for early childhood. So as we go forward and consult with them, watch for that in our state plan, and we'll be providing updates on a regular basis. You can see McKinney-Vento is also there. McKinney-Vento is actually contained within ESSA. That's our Homeless Assistance Act. And there are some new requirements related to McKinney-Vento, and that is found in Title IX of ESSA. Moving forward, you can see that our agenda for today includes a general overview of Title I programs and funding. We'd also like to talk to you about some of the Title I requirements under ESSA that are unique and special to local education agencies. We're going to talk about school improvement, because there's a very large section under Title I that lays out school improvement efforts both at the state and at the local level. Identifications of schools, that's something that certainly Ajit has worked very hard over the last several years. In our last webinar, webinar number 2, and if you were not able to tune in, I suggest you go and review that. Ajit really unpacked data collection and reporting, assessments, and accountability. We believe we are very well positioned, and we'd like to continue the flexibilities we engaged in under our former flexibility waivers. You can also see that improvement activities are outlined in Title I, as well as how we use school improvement funding. So let's talk about the big ideas in Title I basic programs. The purpose of Title I is to improve basic programs. Historically, there's been 2 approaches to do that. Title I is directed on improving the education for disadvantaged students. Historically, if a school had a 40% poverty level, that means the students identified through, or schools identified through census poverty data had 40% or more. Schools were allowed to use whole school programs, and that means that they could combine or braid their local, their federal, and their state funds So for example, I'll use, just for illustrative purposes, I had 10 years ago a reading recovery program. I could combine all of those programs and serve students, whether they were free and reduced lunch, whether they were from poverty or not, to do that. That's called a whole school approach. If you fell below the 40% threshold, you had to target individual students who were at risk. And often, I can say for myself, having worked at both the school and at the district level, often it was incredibly hard to distinguish between these two. You couldn't really tell by looking whether it was a whole school program or whether it was a targeted just for some kids program. And quite honestly, it's not a good way to run a school without having coherence across all your programs. So you can see that we now have some flexibility on using school-wide programs. We have to develop a process and a criteria here at the State Department of Ed for granting approval to school districts at the school level to use a whole school approach if they have less than 40% of their students are from poverty. We'll be providing more information as we go forward with this. I will tell you that this process and criteria will be permissive because we believe coherent programs that improve the education of students are best applied in a whole school approach where any student in need gets the help that they deserve. I'm sure you agree with me on that. When we've separated these out, it just hasn't worked as well. It's created silos, and it's also contributed to the my kids versus your kids mentality that can so often grow in schools. It can lead to duplicative services, et cetera, et cetera. So we really want to use a comprehensive approach to intervention and student support. Moving forward, let's talk a little bit about Title I funding in Connecticut. And this is some of our most recent information that I think helps all of our listeners and participants see the scope of federal support that we receive. I want to correct title, the bullet number 1. When I wrote this webinar over the weekend, I said, based on last year's information, that there's a Title I school in all but 2 LEAs in Connecticut. In fact, there's 1 LEA in Connecticut that doesn't have a Title I school. It's down to 1. So you can see that by all means, poverty continues, whether we're suburban, urban, or rural. Every Connecticut school district has at least 1 title school. LEA funding formulas are incredibly complex, and you could use a doctorate degree in figuring out, kudos to the folks in our grants office that figure out the funding formulas. It is based on census poverty data. I'll share with you that you can see the range of allocations that have been given to school districts from $7,500 to over $10 million. So there is quite a range when it comes to size, scale, and the degree of poverty in different places. And the total allocation that we receive is over $116 million. So we receive tremendous supports, and we don't have any reason to believe that our Title I funding will be impacted in a negative way. Some states across the country, because of poverty formulas, are actually receiving far less funds. Our funds will continue in Title I, or at least at the time of this webinar, are expected to continue. And so we're grateful for that.
So at this time, we're going to open another poll question in which we're curious, what is your experience working with the federal title grants at the local level? So we're going to give a couple moments for everyone to respond to this. So we're looking, do you have previous experience, but you're not currently working with it? You directly manage or oversee these grants? You review or approve the title grant applications, budgets, and spending, or you don't have any experience at all with title grants at the local level?
And I just want to jump in and say any one of those responses is fine. Ajit has got to go to another meeting, so I'm going to have Ajit say goodbye right now.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ajit. Yep. Can you go forward to the next slide, Jen, and we'll talk a little while people are polling?
I can. Give me just a moment. And there we go.
Okay, I want to talk about while the poll is open, I want to talk a little bit about the school improvement aspect of Title I. The big ideas related to that. As I'm sure you've heard in the news and across the country, greater federal flexibility in spending. What we allow the spending, historically has been constrained, far more flexibility. The LEAs in the states have far more control in developing their plans for school improvement. It's not dictated from Washington, and it's much more context-based at the state level. One requirement that's important but should not be new to folks in Connecticut is that you must use evidence-based interventions. And so there has to be some sort of evidence presented in the application that shows why this intervention is wise with the population you serve and with the students at a particular grade level. So developmentally appropriate, right for the population you serve. You can see that improvement plans for schools need to follow a needs assessment and an identification process of resource inequities. Many times school districts in tough budget times, if one school receives more Title I funding than another, there is an inclination to reduce funding to that district. It falls to that school, it falls under supplement, not supplant. And so if there are too few resources in the title school, the local education agency has to identify those and develop a plan to address them. That does not occur each and every year. We're thinking, because we have some flexibility around this, to do this about on a 3-year basis or a 4-year basis. That will be written into the plan when we post in March, and we'll be collecting feedback through our focus groups on that. The next one is district monitoring and support of low-performing schools. There has to be a checks and balance in a way that the district is looking out for their Title I school. That's a requirement under ESSA. We're going to have to provide and will be providing tremendous guidance in this area about what it looks like at the local level. I want to make assurances that we're very conscious of red tape reduction and reducing bureaucratic tasks that take away from leadership and instruction. We are also developing a system of state monitoring and support, which I'll speak about in just a moment. Jennifer, shall we go back and you can give us a little feedback?
Sure. So on our poll results, the overwhelming majority directly manage or oversee title grants. There's no question what everyone's responsibility is for this.
Excellent. So good. So you folks are in the know, and it's important to find out who our audience is. So I won't get in the weeds in terms of title funding. I'll really stick to some of the big changes. For those of you that are in alliance districts, you may be aware that Section 1003, of which we have 2 significant federal grants of a competitive nature. One we refer to as 1003G, that's the first section in this slide I'm going to speak about, and 1003A, which is another direct student service grant. You can see that after 2018, we will be reserving 7% of our title funds because 1003G and title are now combined. So the pot of money will now be found in Title I. It will not be a separate system. We actually think that's a great plan because as districts make an improvement plan, the school improvement part should be included in it, not an entirely separate application process. The reserving of 7%, there is a caveat. As long as we do not create a maintenance of effort problem, which is that we reduce every other district by their amount from the preceding year, we will reserve 7% of the title funding. And states can offer this in a competitive or entitlement grant manner to low-performing schools. And this is very similar to 1003G in the past. This is an open question that we're still grappling with here at the department about whether it makes sense to do competitive grants or entitlement grants. Competitive grants obviously open it to a higher number of low-performing schools. Entitlements would direct it towards the lowest of low-performing schools. And so from an equity perspective, from an access perspective, and also from growing through appreciative inquiry, what's working, we are leaning more towards a competitive process, but that will be within the ESSA process. We have to report annually on LEAs that receive 1003 funds. Now let's talk about 1003A. This has always been a targeted, a grant that focuses on targeted improvement. Sometimes that's for a singular group of students. Sometimes that's for a particular subject area, but it has to be, the funds have to be used directly to improve student services. So you can see that we have permission to reserve up to 3% for competitive grants, and that it has to be, the grants have to be distributed in a geographically diverse way. You can also see that it has to be prioritized for schools needing the most comprehensive or targeted support. 1003A, as I mentioned, has always existed in a separate grant. 1003A has always existed within ESSA under No Child Left Behind, but 1003G has not. And now the two are found in one funding source, and it will occur through one application process. So let's talk a moment about the identification of schools for comprehensive school improvement. The language used under ESSA is comprehensive support and improvement. The process occurs every 3 years. So in Connecticut, you know that our performance office identified schools in need of comprehensive support in 2015-16, and the next time we'll be doing that will be in 2018. We're ahead of the curve. Under ESSA, it's required by 2018, but we thought it very important to do that under our flexibility waiver. We believe that in the case of low-performing schools, overall performance is the most important component found in the law. We have reason to believe that the feds are overreaching a bit in the regs, and we have made statements about low subgroup performance, and that is actually not spelled out in the law. That said, we have a high needs student subgroup that includes all of our student groups based on race and ethnicity, on students with disabilities, English learners, and we believe our high needs student subgroup is actually a very transparent way to identify schools and districts that are not able to help those students reach the same performance as their peers. So we'll have to wait for the final regulations to have more information, and I just wanted to tip you off that B may become a bigger issue depending on how the regulations fall. The other way that comprehensive support and improvement is needed, this is a jump in the percentage. High schools failing to graduate 1/3 of their students, which is approximately 67%. I believe the number previously under No Child Left Behind was 60%. Title I schools that have not improved within a state-determined time frame, but not greater than 4 years. In a future webinar, we'll be talking about the state plan and the long-term goals and interim measures we are required to create. And we think we've got a very efficient system, and we will very likely be using the 4 years for schools that have not improved, and that really means flatlining, that there is not significant growth. If you recall from webinar 2, we have a huge focus on growth. It has an equal place in our accountability system, student growth on assessment, as status measure, which is how many students have reached proficiency. We think it's a very important aspect that was missing under No Child Left Behind. Okay, moving on, let's talk about the required school improvement activities. This is directed for states, which means what is the Connecticut Department of Education required to do? In addition to supports for LEAs with low performance, states must also develop performance management and technical assistance. We must ensure that the allocation of school improvement resources are distributed and guided to LEAs. We must ensure, which means we have to develop internal processes, that we have provided tremendous guidance and have monitoring of the use and approval of the use of evidence-based interventions. We are required to provide more rigorous state interventions for the lowest performing schools. We are also required to ensure that periodic resource allocation equity is reviewed at the local level. Again, this gets back to supplement, not supplant, and to ensure that Title I schools are not losing out on state or local funding because it's supplanted through title funds. And then the last one is the catch-all other state-identified strategies. So as I mentioned, performance management and technical assistance. This includes a process for reviewing and approving LEA plans. I want to take a moment here to talk about the fact that Connecticut's one of the few states left, if not the only state left, that does not have an electronic application platform and an opportunity for team review at the State Department of Education level. We want to be able to bring a cross-divisional team of people together to very quickly approve, review, and hopefully approve applications for title funds. We also believe in a bold move that it makes sense for alliance districts to have a singular application for both their alliance district funds and their federal funds under Titles I, II, III, and IV. And so we are looking at software at this time to be able to make that become a reality. We think it's pretty logical that we will have to pilot this in 2017-18 with full implementation in the fall of 2018 across the state. But tremendous amounts of training across LEAs will be required. And seeing as so many people listening in today have direct management over this, stay tuned and we'll provide more information as it becomes available. Having been at the district level myself, I know how too many improvement plans actually can be a waste of energy and a waste of time, and we believe the more you're pulling in one direction for a singular set of improvement goals, our goal is to make that easy for you and to provide as much guidance ahead of time and to have a review team look at it and provide you with detailed feedback and move the process forward. Currently, our title applications are typically due in September, and the funds are typically released in December or January. The reason that is because this is a paper process, and staff here are siloed in different locations. We'd like to bring everyone together and expedite that process. We also need to develop monitoring plans, plans to collect and use data, plans for continuing improvement, and how do we differentiate technical assistance to our districts through periodic reviews of the comprehensive support and improvement plans that districts will be required to create for each and every school. So there's a lot I just packed into that slide, but we will continue to talk with you through stakeholder engagement and in our sort of road shows, for lack of a better word. While we're out and about, we're happy to share this plan that we're proposing going forward. So let's talk about the required school improvement activities for LEAs. So for schools that have overall low performance, and again, these are title schools with overall low student performance, the district is required to develop a comprehensive support and improvement plan that includes evidence-based interventions, and the plans have to be developed, as I said earlier, after a needs assessment and a look at resources in the low-performing school. And then the State Department will approve the school plan. We are again going to expedite that process, especially for districts that have multiple Title I schools that are functioning at a low level, so that the application and review process can go more quickly. Again, there's a separate set of actions that will be designated for schools that have multiple years where they are not making any progress whatsoever. So let's take a look. When it comes to changes under ESSA, it's important to know that the school improvement models that we've used historically in the Alliance districts, such as small learning communities, school improvement models have been repealed under federal law. We are going to create a needs assessment inventory at the school level, but we will do that through a working group of school and district representatives. Schools with overall low performance tend to be found, but are not exclusively found, inside the Alliance districts. So a lot of the energies for schools with overall low performance will be occurring in Alliance districts. We are proposing a triage approach to school improvement, and we'll be proposing and planning to provide the greatest amount of state support and supervision to, if you'll recall, these are 10 districts referred to as the Governor's Education Reform Districts. And the 10 districts are identified as Bridgeport, East Hartford, Hartford, Meriden, New Britain, New Haven, New London, Norwich, Waterbury, and Windham. Those 10 schools, those 10 districts, I'm sorry, and the schools within them will get the highest level of state support. And by support, I mean both opportunities for funding, and that includes the SIG grants, the 1003 grants. And I'm not saying exclusive of any other district, but they will have sort of a streamlined approach to get into that competition. They will also get more state support through a cross-divisional team is what we are envisioning. The remaining 20 districts of the Alliance District, I won't read the name, all the names, but the remaining 20 will get also a high level of guidance, but it won't be, it'll be less than the group that I just spoke about. We're also proposing that schools with low overall performance receive the most state-intensive support, and by combining the efforts of both the CSDE title office and the turnaround. Through this cross-divisional team I spoke about, we will be creating graduated spending guidance with more guidance for the lowest performing districts, less guidance for the next group, and for Title I schools that are performing at a high level or at an acceptable level, they will get guidance, but it will not be as restrictive or as prescribed as guidance with the other two groups. Moving on to our next slide, let's talk about schools with low student group performance. The Commissioner has actually tasked us with taking a moment to look at the term subgroup and actually begin in our mindset changing our reference to that group as student groups. There's nothing sub about these groups except they're a portion of the larger student population. But we want to be positive about that, and we refer now to it as student groups. Districts must develop a targeted support and improvement plan to support schools that have problems with a specific student group performance. So let's say in a particular school, students with disabilities are really, there's a huge gap between them and their non-disabled peers. Schools will need a targeted support and improvement plan, and the districts must monitor and support these schools. You can see the other criteria are very consistent with what we've heard already. Evidence-based, following a needs assessment, resource inequities. Are there enough special education teachers in the school? Are there enough, is there adaptive equipment? Is there enough opportunities for students to access all the services that regular education students access, or is it in conflict because of, say, a special education schedule or the use of resource rooms? So all of this, again, will be designed with a stakeholder group so that we have a statewide needs assessment and a resource inequity. I envision it as more like a checklist. So our role is to approve the plan, monitor the plan, and take more rigorous action if there is not growth in that subgroup. How's our time, Jennifer?
We're doing really well right now.
Okay, good. So now comes because that was, again, a tremendous amount of content. I'll give you a moment to take a look at this visual because it provides you with a quick and easy way of looking at our proposal. You can see in the gray, ed reform districts will receive individualized guidance and support, and they will receive intensive work with a cross-divisional team of people from the department. That will include folks from our special education office, folks from our academic office, folks from our talent office, from our performance office, and from our turnaround office. And all hands on deck for those 10 districts. The other Alliance districts, which are 20 other districts, will receive defined guidance and support on spending and evidence-based practices, and they will continue to receive Alliance District Network support. And then lastly, all other LEAs will receive broad spending and evidence-based practice guidance and the standard support and monitoring, again in a cross-divisional way from our department. I hope this helps you envision what the department at this point is proposing. You can see a caveat at the bottom that the identification of low-performing schools occurred in 2016, and so we will be operating from that list, and it will occur every 3 years thereafter, which means in 2018 we'll be identifying low-performing school districts again.
So at this time, we're opening up to questions. We would love to hear from you. So continue to send in your questions via that chat function. We have received some as the webinar has been going on. The first question is from a superintendent in our area, and this is one I can actually answer for you, so you can take a break. So the question was, I haven't heard about a focus group in my area. Who do I contact? This is one in which you can reach out to Jonathan Costa, who's the Assistant Executive Director of Ed Advance, and his email address is Costa, which is C-O-S-T-A, @edadvance.org. So, and if you have any other questions about the focus groups, you can always email me, and I can put you right in contact with the appropriate person.
And can you explain Ed Advance?
Oh, yes. Ed Advance is the new name for Education Connection. So that RESC has been rebranded. So if you're used to seeing Education Connection in the past, it is now Ed Advance, which is all one word, just for your reference. So another question that just came through is, when will we receive written guidance on Title I and the school improvement application process? So I'm going to let you answer that one.
Excellent. So as I mentioned, we'll immediately begin drafting our plan after the end of the stakeholder engagement process, which is from now until December. So beginning in earnest in the month of September, we'll start to put the bones together, the bare bones of the plan, and then depending on the direction of the feedback we've received, we will begin to write in earnest. We are looking for critical friends to help with that process. I met with a group today that has shared that they're willing to read portions of our plan. I will tell you that in our January webinar, we will be publishing for you the different, this is a divide and conquer kind of process, so we will be publishing for you the different chiefs of the different offices and who has which piece of the state plan. It's not hard to imagine that a G. Kapala-Krishnan will be doing the accountability pieces. Isabelina Rodriguez, Dr. Rodriguez, will be doing the standards and assessment pieces. So we will do a divide and conquer approach. So we expect that we'll be done with our plan and by February, and we will begin drafting our guidance. And again, we're going to be reaching out to stakeholders to make sure that that happens.
And a question that just came in is, as we look to develop the next district improvement plan later this year, Should we wait to get more specific guidance, or do we continue with the talent, academics, culture, and operations format?
At this point, and I will tell you that this is moving pieces, I believe that because our draft to the federal government will not be approved before summer, that we should continue to follow the existing framework that we have. And if we are out of sync, our goal is at some point to have title and alliance district plans submitted in the spring of each year with approval. The federal funds do not become available until September, and at that point start to release funds. And so that singular application, we want to move to the alliance district plan and release the alliance district money in August and the federal money in September. At least that's the plan for now. So stay the course, and we will let you know as we do, but I don't think it's realistic to think we're going to have all of this up and ready to go by April, because the process won't even be approved yet.
And another question that came in was, in regards to the Title I needs assessment, will an assessment template be provided by the state?
Absolutely. Not only an assessment template, but an assessment work group will develop, because, again, we want to make sure we have folks that are at the local level saying, what do you look for in terms of the needs? So there will actually be tremendous guidance and a template for both the needs assessment and the resource inequity checklist, so that we have a consistent process and folks have the structures they need to make that happen.
Okay. I want to move forward to our next one.
Yes,
we want to ask that one? Sorry, another question just came in. Sorry about that. We have a question that's all about evidence-based practices. What will be our process for establishing evidence-based practice guidance?
Not unlike, thank you for that question, not unlike the work we did around scientific research-based intervention at the state level, where we had working groups developing guidance for that. This is such a broad topic that districts must be using evidence-based practices that we really need to put a working group together of internal staff here at the department, school and district personnel, and research experts, as well as folks from higher ed, to develop differentiated guidance across pre-K-12 school improvement. And so this isn't just reading and mathematics. Really and truly, this allows for social emotional learning. This allows for access to high-level courses, advanced coursework. We're going to need to have some pretty comprehensive guidance created, and we look to our colleagues in K-12 to make that a reality. Other areas might include improving school climate and culture. One of the challenges I know when I worked at the district level is oftentimes a lot of title funding is tied up in salaries. And while this is a persistent concern, we need to look at, of the available dollars spent for programming, are we doing it in the most evidence-based way? And if we're funding salaries, are those positions based on evidence of what moves the dial for school improvement? And so really and truly going forward, we need a collective effort for that. Another big focus under ESSA is family engagement, and so we're going to be looking to provide practice guidance on that as well. It makes sense to do it in a way that there is guidance for pre-K-2, for grades 3-5, grades 6-8, and grades 9-12, so that people can literally flip for the particular Title I school, can flip to the area that applies and focus on the evidence-based practices that are developmentally appropriate for that age group.
Great, thank you. If you go to our next slide,
okay.
We're going to wrap this up since we're running out of time. So just so you can see when our upcoming webinars are, our next webinar is going to be held on a Tuesday, which is November 15th. In this session, we're going to focus on ESSA Titles 2 and 3. Please expect to receive registration and login information early next week. Also, please mark your calendars for our 5th webinar. This one will also be held on a Tuesday in January, which is the 17th. In this webinar, we're going to discuss ESSA Title IV, our Connecticut State Plan, as well as long-term goals and progress monitoring. We hope you can join us. Mark those dates on your calendar. And as always, we wrap up by showing our last slide, in which we always want to thank you for participating in today's webinar. We now post the recorded webinars in 3 different locations for easy access. It's on the Superintendent's Digest, and also on our ESSA resources page, which is located off of our CSDE homepage. It can also be found under our ctcorestandards.org website under the Professional Development button. And as always, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to Ellen or Ajit at any time. Their contact information is located right there on the screen. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.